If you're looking to compete in a rock crawling comp that uses the WRCCA rule set, or an adaptation of it, when you first get to the rules document, you may be in for a bit of a shock. At first glance, this is actually quite a lengthy document. Thank you, wind. And it can be overwhelming for newcomers to comps, particularly if you haven't competed before. Where on earth do you start? In our little club here in Melbourne, Australia, I've come across several comments as we get comps started again for 2023. I couldn't make heads or tails of the rules. I had no idea where to start. How do I know what class my vehicle fits in? Everything is actually laid out in here, but it is a hefty document. The good news is that I found that once you break this thing down, it isn't actually all that overwhelming. And so today, I'd like to help you get started with our rules, or to take a refresher if you haven't looked at them for a while. My name's Craig. I'm part of Melbourne Comp Crawlers, just a group of like-minded hobbyists who like getting out and playing with our toy trucks. And we use the World Radio Controlled Crawler Association document, and currently it's the 2023 version. We also have a couple of extra classes tacked on. In this little series of videos, I'm going to take you through just an overview of each class and show you some examples of what fits in the rules and what doesn't, to help you get started with your comp journey too. So this document is split up into 8 parts, and we're only concerned with one part. That's 3 pages of the whole document here. The rest of it is all about scoring on the course. That's the first section. We're going to look at the vehicle specs, which is the second section. And then sections 3 to 8, they're event management, course design, judging, there's a glossary, and then there's a penalty details and sportsmanship at the end. So most of this is actually to help the organizers run the event and to score it. And the pages we're actually interested in, section 2, which is called Vehicle Requirements. Now I've got a link to the rules in the description of this video, and I'm also going to put a link to the transcript of this video in a more condensed document form. It's like a conversational overview, so I've just done a couple of paragraphs at the most concerning each class, just to help you get your head around it. And then when you need the specifics like lengths and specific body sizes and placement, that's where you're going to want to go to the rules. One last thing on the rest of this is to do with scoring. If you're brand new to comps, here's a video. In fact, I've got quite a few, but I'll just link one of these ones here, where I've made a couple of dummy courses and driven a couple of cars. When I was introducing the new Capra UTB 18 versus the Mini, and you can see how these two were scored on a course. And that might be useful just to show you what it looks like when we say getting through a gate, making forward progress, all that stuff which it talks about in here. This video here will actually show you what that looks like on the day. Right, let's get to vehicle requirements. First, let's talk about what kind of vehicles are allowed in this competition. This goes for all the classes. Only 4-wheeled vehicles are allowed unless there's a special exemption for a class, and sometimes a club will adapt the rules to that. Our Melbourne Comp Crawlers Club, and most of the clubs I'm aware of, are all 4x4 and 4-wheel propulsion, so there's no other way of pushing the car forward. When we measure the vehicles, and again this applies to all classes, they need to be sitting on a flat surface. This is the only way we can get accurate measurements of all the different parts of the vehicle. And sometimes, not with my Pro here, but sometimes when they articulate, that can affect the wheelbase. So at all parts of the suspension cycle, we're looking for it to be within a certain size. One important measurement we'll be taking on all of these classes when we go through them is the wheelbase, which is the distance between the center front axle and the rear axle, and that's the center of your wheel. And the way we'll do that is to place it on a table, and literally, I mean, some clubs have a pre-made thing, but you'd actually just have your ruler in the center line, so we can see that the wheelbase of my Pro here, it's rough because we're not on a table, but it's about 314 mil, which is just over 12 inches. Now, to make sure the vehicles all look like real life vehicles, whether they're the really hardcore comp stuff or your more scale stuff, the roof of the vehicle needs to be raised at least 1 inch, which is just under 3 centimeters from the main chassis, and the sides of the frame need to be at least 1 inch tall. Now, all classes have minimum measurements for their wheelbase, for their track width and their overall length. and some of the classes get more specific than that. Now, winching of axles is allowed in some classes, which is where you artificially pull the chassis down towards the axles with a winch. But the winch line needs to be attached within ½ an inch of the center of the axle, and it can only have one attachment point. And finally, there's no limit on the number of radio channels you can use on a vehicle unless it's specified in the rules. We're going to get to examples for all of these classes. Here's how we measure the vehicles. Track width, which is the distance between your wheels, is measured from the outside edge of the front and of the rear tires in a resting position. That's it for vehicle requirements. Basically, it's just that it's got to look like a car to some extent. Now, in the following videos, we're just going to do a summary of each of these classes. But on this video, I'm just going to include Super because I haven't got a Super vehicle here. And I rather suspect that anyone who's building a Super rig will already be familiar enough with the rest of these, because Super is kind of like the Pro class with a motor on each axle, but on steroids, because you've got steering at each end, the wheels are bigger, you've got 2-axle steering and independent motor control of each end. Super, I think, might be the last class that someone might need this little mini-series for. Firstly, the vehicle's wheelbase must be between 16 and 18 inches. There's no restriction on the steering configuration, so you're free to choose whatever works best for your vehicle. The wheels and rims must have a minimum diameter of 3.2 inches at the bead surface. And you're allowed to modify the wheels as long as the tyre bead surface remains at least 3.2 inches in diameter. You can also modify the tyres. Here's what modified tyres look like. This is 2 different tyres cut together. Sidewall from one and pins from another kind of tyre, but only using pliable rubber, so you can't mix materials. It's got to be just rubber. And finally, the body or bodiless measurements of the vehicle must be at least 12 inches long, 3 inches wide and 3 inches tall. Now that's it for Super. Let's get into the Pro class next, and that'll be in this video right here.